I'm Jacob Chandler, and I'm a Boy Scout. Today is August 15, 2015, and I will be interviewing Earl Peavy. He is a veteran of the Vietnam War. He is also a veteran of the Cold War era. This interview is part of my Eagle Scout Service project. The veterans of LaSalle Parish often have stories that go untold. The LaSalle Veterans Exhibit and the interviews are part of my Eagle Scout Service project. The LaSalle Cultural Center of Jena, Louisiana will display my LaSalle Veterans Exhibit. Our mission is to preserve our LaSalle Parish heritage. Today I'm interviewing Earl Peavy. He is my grandfather. His granddaddy. What war and eras did you serve in?
I served during the Vietnam conflict, or Vietnam War, which was, my area of service was in the late 1960s in that conflict. Also, I served during a period of time of the Cold War era, which extended for a far greater period of time. But the Cold War era was underway at the time that I was in the military.
Yes, sir. What branch of service were you in?
I served in the United States Navy. I served on active duty about 5.5 years. I served in naval aviation. I was a flyer. And in the Naval Aviation Program, I was a naval flight officer. And
Granddaddy, are there any particular missions that stood out to you?
yes, of course there were a lot of flights in those years. I accumulated a little over 1,000, roughly 1,100 flight hours.
Yes, sir.
Just in my one tour, counting my training and my operational at sea time. So there were many flights, and slightly over 300 carrier landings during that period of time. But a flight that stands out to me, that I was very thankful of the way it turned out eventually, during the Vietnam conflict, and during a hot summer night. It gets to be warm temperatures in the South Pacific during the summer, and hot, humid, and we would be oftentimes soaking wet with sweat when we would return from a mission. Not always so much from fear, though fear is a very good phenomenon to keep in mind, because it helps you not take things for granted, and it helps you perform your task with your attention devoted solely to your task, which is very necessary not only for your own survival, but also for the survival of someone else that you are a flight crew member with. So, as I mentioned previously, that we were two-seat aircraft, and we always functioned as a crew, and even went to training, survival schools together. And we learned to try to survive and function as a two-man crew. But one particular mission that the way it turned out was a great relief to me, ultimately, was following a night mission. At night, we flew by ourselves, low level. We did not carry cameras at night. We had cameras that could take photographs at night with a flasher system, but that invites ground fire. But we used infrared or thermal mapping of troop concentrations and power plant facilities, roads and barges and railways and things like that at night. But at night in reconnaissance, we flew by ourselves. We did not carry a fighter escort with us, because at the high speeds there's too much danger of running together. Whereas in the daylight at high speeds you're able to see each other. So as we returned from a sortie that went all the way across North Vietnam and over to the North Vietnamese Laotian border, near the city of Vinh Son, a city that was built in the curve of a river, always very heavily defended, always over near the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was a major routing network for North Vietnam to move troop supplies and materials to South Vietnam. We were to do reconnaissance of about 80 or 90 miles of road section that night, infrared or thermal, and we took much anti-aircraft fire. Of course, we were normally above speed of sound, we were fast, and we were very low, as we did day and night. But that was a particularly long mission, and we were nearly out of fuel before we got back to the coast of the Tonkin Gulf. And at high speeds versus optimum flying, you might have optimum flying and managing of the fuel systems. You might have 2.5 or 3 hours worth of fuel at maximum speed in afterburners. You might have 18 minutes of fuel.
Yes, sir.
So fuel management is a very important issue under combat conditions. And normally we would top off on fuel from the tanker just before heading overland, because overland we would be always at high speed, and we had a certain number of minutes, and you can only weave and turn, and you must stay very close to the choreography of the flight planning, or fuel exhaustion will get you.
Yes, sir.
In the United States, you land at the nearest airport. That's big enough. Civilian airport if necessary. Over North Vietnam, the nearest airport is 300, 400 miles further away, back out at sea. So if you run out of fuel, though you have avoided anti-aircraft fire or any surface-to-air missile fire that might have occurred. Fuel starvation will be your end, because in a matter of minutes, mismanagement, and you will be ejected in the dark over hostile territory. So that means perhaps in an hour you will be a POW or worse. So therefore, fuel management is critical. And fuel management is an issue between the pilot and navigation and the computer system and the speeds and the turns and how much time did you take in the turns and the numbers of seconds. You don't fly directly to a target and turn and fly directly back as you might in an airliner. You weave and turn at high speed to keep their radar tracking systems and gun systems from locking onto you. They are there. They already know you're there. You're not going to surprise anyone. The war's been going on for years. And they were using the best radar tracking systems, anti-aircraft fire, and surface-to-air missile systems that the Soviet Union, Russia could manufacture. They were a surrogate of the Soviet Union. They operated Soviet radars, Soviet anti-aircraft systems, Soviet missiles. Soviet MiGs were flown by their pilots and a few Russian pilots for training purposes. So we were dealing with de facto Soviet hardware and tactics and a Soviet ally. And we knew that. But fuel starvation will be what likely gets you on 7 or 8 times out of 10 if you follow your techniques to avoid getting hit by ground fire. Fuel starvation is a crew factor, a mismanagement factor, or a get in trouble and then not have enough fuel to get out or get back to Thailand to the nearest Air Force base. We ran into much difficulty avoiding missile tracking, and we had to much depart on 3 or 4 occasions from our choreographed flight schedule in order to break locks on missile fire. We were down to about, when we crossed the coast, back to open water. And remember, the open waters are also a lot of North Vietnamese fishermen. So just because you are over water doesn't mean you're safe. But as we called feet wet, meaning to the AWACS far away, monitoring our movement and the air sea rescue, which meant we had crossed back over into water about 3 a.m. in the morning. Hot, sultry night. And low level, we were down to about 8 to 9 minutes worth of fuel to our best ability to compute. So we immediately started climbing and calling for the tanker. And the tanker is maybe 80 or 90 miles away. The tanker can't afford to get too close to the North Vietnamese coast or they'll get shot down by North Vietnamese fighters. Tankers do not carry armor. But as we started climbing and heading towards the tanker and the AWACS, the voice of the young man named Andy in the AWACS, he was a naval officer, I knew him, he was a friend, one of that 40. As Andy gives us steering information, we knew where we were headed, but the tanker did not know where we were. But as he gave steering to the tanker pilot, their call sign 10 pin, and our call sign Flint River. 10 pin's words were something like, steady Flint, I'm coming to you. So therefore, we did not have to wander around hunting the tanker at night when we were down to a few minutes of fuel.
Yes, sir.
He came towards us. Those were, since I handle communication in our aircraft, I'm doing the communicating, and Commander Fowler is saying how many minutes, how many minutes, how many minutes, and man, the computer, we're estimating how many minutes, and we're wet with sweat, and if we flame out, then we've got to eject, because we did not have a high survival rate to ditch our type aircraft. And so it would be a dark night and far away from home in the water if we had to do that. But we came within, we went to our position, and the tanker said, hold what you have, Flint. I'm pulling alongside you, and I'm going to pull in front of you, since you have to get behind the tanker. So we did not have to maneuver. If we would have had to maneuver or maybe made a 30-mile or 25-mile orbit or something like that, we would have ran out of fuel with the tanker nearby. But he joined on us in the dark. And we were so happy to hear the word from old Tin Pin.
Yes, sir.
A very steady voice.